At least one Patriot air defense system from Israel is already operating in Ukraine, and 2 more systems will arrive during the fall. Such a statement was made today by the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, effectively confirming that Israel has begun transferring important weapons to Ukraine, although there had been rumors about this for a long time. In addition, today the President of Ukraine revealed the first details of a huge $90 billion deal with Donald Trump. It is for this amount that Ukraine will purchase weapons from the Americans, including long-range missiles. At the same time, Zelensky confirmed that Ukraine itself is launching the export of its own weapons, but he also threatened Moscow with a blackout if the Russians continue to strike at Ukrainian energy infrastructure. And he once again emphasized that this logic of war is fully supported and welcomed by Donald Trump if Ukraine strikes Moscow, if Moscow continues to strike Ukraine. In this episode, we will analyze the key statements made by Volodymyr Zelensky after his return from the United States of America. I'm Alexei Pechi. Today is September 27th. And before we start this episode, I want to remind you that every day several news analysis segments are released on this YouTube channel. So you stay up to date with all the news. That's why I recommend subscribing to this YouTube channel, liking this video, and leaving a detailed comment under this episode so that YouTube recommends this video to as many viewers as possible. I would be grateful to you for that. So, the first statement, which has already caused a lot of buzz today, concerns the supply of weapons to Ukraine from Israel. Ukraine's president said Israel delivered the P-3 OT air defense system, which has been protecting Ukraine's skies for a month. Ukraine is also expecting 2 more systems in the near future. Here is a quote from Zelensky. The Israeli Patriot system has been operating in Ukraine for a month. There are already 2 Patriot systems working. We will receive more in the fall, and I won't say anything else about the Patriot. Well, I should note here that the 2 additional Patriot systems are not coming from Israel, but rather from other partners. Well, most likely from Germany, because it was Germany that announced the transfer of Patriots. Nevertheless, the news about the supply of Patriots from Israel is noteworthy, since there was a lot of discussion around this topic. And here I would like to remind you that back on June 9, Israel's ambassador to Ukraine, Mikhail Brodsky, stated that his country had transferred a Patriot air defense system to Ukraine. As he explained at the time, these are Israeli systems that were in service with Israel in the early 1990s and were refurbished by the Americans. Israel agreed to transfer them to Ukraine. However, literally the next day, the Israeli Foreign Ministry denied this information, stating that Israel cannot do it. Israel gave Patriot systems to Ukraine. So then everyone started wondering, did Israel transfer them or not? A little later, on June 14th, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said that Israel did transfer 1 Patriot, but to the United States for restoration. However, there was still no Israeli air defense system on the territory of Ukraine. And then Zelensky said, quote, "We are grateful that this is supposedly for us." Supposedly, since we don't have it yet. If we had it, I would say yes, Israel gave it to us, and I wouldn't be telling this long chain of events. Through whom and for what purpose are they passing it on? It went to America for restoration, and the system still hasn't reached us in Ukraine. A few days later, that very Brodsky reported that Israel had given Patriot to Ukraine, but not directly, through the United States, where the systems are being upgraded before being sent to Ukraine. At last, Ukraine has received the Patriot system from Israel, ending this saga. Well, since we're already talking about arms supplies, Zelensky also mentioned another important detail. He stated that Ukraine has provided the United States with all its wishes and requests regarding weaponry in documents related to the big mega arms deal. Whether there is a request for Tomahawk missiles will remain without comment due to the sensitivity of the subject, Zelensky said. But this already indicates that Donald Trump has not yet made a final decision on this issue. And it is obvious that this issue is still being discussed and remains unresolved. If you look at American media, the sources differ in their wording. But I want to point out, no one specifically stated that Trump refused to transfer Tomahawk missiles. There was only information from Axios. And even there, that wording wasn't used. The wording was more like, Tomahawk is the only system from the entire list of weapons that Zelensky requested that raises doubts. That's the whole wording. And let me remind you, let me quote Zelensky here. He assured that the United States received from Ukraine all the details regarding Kyiv's desire to obtain certain weapons with details and illustrations. Quote, "And all of this, in principle, is provided for in our big $90 billion deal. We're also open to separate agreements on specific weapon types, including long-range ones. I can't share more details." It's a very sensitive question. Let me also remind you that Zelensky, during a closed meeting with Donald Trump on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly Summit, asked for Tomahawk missiles with a range of 1,600 kilometers to be provided to Ukraine. Ukraine has repeatedly raised the issue of supplying this type of weapon over the past year, and now American newspapers are reporting that the Donald Trump administration is considering the possibility of granting Zelensky's request and providing Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. This would be a huge step compared to the actions of the 46th United States President Joseph Biden's administration, which refused to provide missiles due to concerns about so-called escalation. Well, against the backdrop of preparations for a mega arms deal between the United States and Ukraine, Zelensky announced that Ukraine is launching the export of its own weapons. In addition to Europe, the United States and the Middle East, African countries are also actively interested in Ukrainian weapons. Zelensky explained that Ukraine will only allow the sale of those types of weapons that are not in short supply for the Ukrainian army. According to him, first and foremost, Ukrainian weapons should strengthen the front and only then be exported. The income from exporting surplus models will be used to purchase and produce what is most lacking. First and foremost, drones and modern interception systems. Ukraine already has arms representation across Europe, the United States, and notably the Middle East. Several African countries have also made new proposals. In particular, African countries approached Ukraine for weapons at the United Nations General Assembly, and there is already an initial agreement on the supply of Ukrainian weapons to Africa. Zelensky also stated that the Russian Federation is having economic problems, but is financing the war through the sale of energy resources. If these funds are not available and social support decreases, then people will be dissatisfied, which is something the Kremlin is very afraid of. And here it should be acknowledged that Europe, not directly but through other countries in one way or another, receives energy resources from the Russian Federation. And thanks to this, Russia exports energy and receives money in return, which it spends exclusively on the war. Next, I'll quote Zelensky. "If there is a decrease in social support in Russia, people will be dissatisfied, and accordingly the Russian leadership will be dissatisfied because Russia has always changed due to hunger riots." I'm not saying which direction, but a different leadership would come, so they're clearly afraid of that. Europe must stop all supplies from the Russian Federation today. There are risks, we understand that, there is other logistics, it may be more expensive, but we need to find a solution and stop buying energy resources from Russia. And here, a rather interesting statement appeared. Zelensky today announced that already in October, Ukraine will offer Slovakia alternative steps for energy support. We're talking about an alternative to Russian gas and oil. Zelensky also said that Ukraine could talk to Hungary about this topic, but there have been no steps from Budapest except for some signals in the media, which are not in support of Ukraine. Let me remind you, Robert Fitz came to Kiev just over a week ago to discuss this topic. Slovakia isn't opposed to giving up Russian oil and gas, but they are requesting help to find alternatives. So, is Ukraine already ready to offer these countries an alternative? So, pretending that they can't survive without Russian gas is a lie. And finally, I'll add another telling quote from Zelensky. Russia must clearly know that civilized countries differ from wild ones in that they never start first and are not aggressors. But that doesn't mean they're weak or need to show weakness. If we are threatened with a blackout, for example in the capital of Ukraine, then the Kremlin should know that there will be a blackout in the capital of Russia as well. That's a brief summary of some of the points we discussed with President Donald Trump. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.